picture this. You are standing in a dark bathroom.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and the door is locked behind you. The only light in the entire space is this tiny razor-thin sliver creeping in under the door frame from the hallway.
Right, just enough light to see that you can't really see.
Exactly. You are staring straight ahead into the mirror, and because your eyes haven't quite adjusted to the dark yet, you can barely make out the blurry, shadowy outline of your own face in the glass.
It's a deeply unsettling environment.
It is dead quiet. I mean, you can hear your own breathing. And suddenly, standing there in the dark, you feel it.
That anxiety spiking.
Yes, that undeniable, primal, heavy urge welling up in your chest. It's a very specific kind of panic that demands you make an immediate choice,
You have to act.
Right. You either throw open that door and run away as fast as you can, or you open your mouth, stare into your own dark reflection, and say the forbidden name.
And, that moment of hesitation is entirely universal.
Is it really?
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating biological and psychological crossroads. You are standing at the absolute edge of your own manufactured terror.
Manufactured terror. I like that phrase.
Well, your central nervous system is essentially demanding a binary decision right there. You either succumb to the flight response, or you intentionally lean into the terror and trigger the ritual.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Whether you are like a hardened skeptic who rolls your eyes at ghost stories, or a massive folklore enthusiast, or honestly just insanely curious about the weird, borderline, inexplicable things human beings voluntarily do to themselves.
Which is a long list, by the way.
Such a long list. But today's journey is going to completely rewire how you see your own reflection. Our mission today is to take a massive stack of historical records, folkloric studies, and modern neurological research, and really unpack why the Bloody Mary legend has terrified us for over 400 years.
Because we are looking at a phenomenon that on its surface seems like just a silly childhood dare.
Right, like a sleepover game.
Exactly. But underneath, it serves as this bridge connecting medieval European politics, ancient romantic divination practices, the intricate and glitchy mechanics of human visual processing, and the deep developmental psychology of adolescence.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because before we start tracking down the historical identities of who Bloody Mary actually is, or digging into the actual neuroscience of why our visual cortex betrays us in the dark, we have to look at the supernatural recipe itself.
The setup.
We have the fundamental anatomy of a summoning. Because you don't just stumble into this experience, right? It requires a very specific setup.
The word recipe is actually a highly accurate way to frame it. I mean, folklore functions very much like an oral recipe passed down over centuries.
Like a weird game of generational telephone.
Yeah, precisely. As it moves from, say, a 17th century European village to an American colonial settlement, or eventually to a 1990s middle school sleepover, the minor ingredients change based on local tastes and fears.
But the core elements stay the same.
Right. The core architecture, the foundational elements required to bake the terror, remains incredibly robust and consistent across all those eras.
So there is always a highly specific stage. You need a dark room, you need a mirror, and like almost universally, that room has to be a bathroom.
Which is a very specific modern evolution.
Right. But why? I think about the layout of a normal house, and you could easily find a mirror in a bedroom or a hallway, Why does the modern iteration of this ritual insist on the bathroom?
Well, it comes down to the unique sensory and psychological environment of modern domestic architecture.
Okay, how so?
If you look at the floor plan of an average contemporary home, the bathroom is often the only room entirely devoid of natural light when the door is closed.
Oh, that makes sense, especially in like interior apartments or houses where the bathroom doesn't even have a window.
Exactly. But beyond the sheer density of the darkness, it is the most inherently private space in human daily life.
Yeah, nobody bothers you in the bathroom.
Right. It is the one room where locking the door and completely isolating yourself is socially expected and completely normalized.
I hadn't considered the acoustics either. When you lock yourself in a bathroom, the hard surfaces, the tile, the porcelain, the glass, they create this very distinct, echoing soundscape.
It's very sterile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every breath you take, every shuffle of your feet is amplified. You are entirely cut off from the muffled, comfortable sounds of the rest of the house.
And that acoustic isolation compounds the visual isolation. It creates a highly controlled environment of sensory deprivation.
So you're basically putting yourself in a DIY isolation tank.
Essentially, yes. You are blending a space that is completely familiar and mundane with an atmosphere that suddenly feels profoundly unsettling. And as we will explore later when we dive into the clinical neuroscience, this environment isn't just about setting a spooky mood.
It actually does something to your brain.
Oh, absolutely. Starving your brain of light and sound is a functional, absolute biological requirement for the psychological mechanics of the mirror experience to actually trigger.
Man, it's like a crowdsourced horror game where every generation, every region added their own weird expansion pack to the rules.
That's a great way to put it.
Because standing in a dark bathroom just isn't enough. You have to initiate contact. The chant itself has this wild evolutionary tree. I mean, a baseline is just repeating Bloody Mary.
Right, the classic invocation.
But depending on where you grew up, you might have been told you have to say it 3 times, or 5 times, or 13.
The numbers always have some sort of folkloric significance.
Yeah, I've even read accounts of kids claiming you have to spin in circles and chant it 100 times.
Oh.
Or just keep saying it, like a mantra, until she physically breaks through the glass.
And the variations in the incantation are a study in how communities localize fear. You find regions where the name mutates completely.
Wait, they don't even use the name Mary.
Well, they do, but with a twist. Hail Mary is a common variant, which introduces a heavy, almost sacrilegious undertone.
Oh, wow. Yeah, warping a foundational Catholic prayer into a supernatural summons, that is intense.
Very. In other areas, she becomes Mary Jane, which sounds almost innocent. Or the ritual involves a pleading, submissive phrase like, Bloody Mary, I believe in you.
Oh, I hate that.
Right, it transforms the chant from a childish dare into an act of forced worship.
Then there is the version that genuinely makes my stomach turn. The hyper-specific, deeply aggressive chant, I killed your baby, Bloody Mary.
Yes, the baby variant.
Chanting that into a mirror in the pitch black, I mean, it takes the ritual out of the realm of a spooky ghost story and injects this visceral psychological cruelty into it.
It is an incredibly dark evolution of the chant, but it didn't emerge from nowhere.
It didn't.
No. That specific brutal phrase serves as a direct bridge to the historical traumas we are going to unpack today.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
But before we get to the history, we have to look at the theatrics that often accompany these chants. The physical actions demanded by the ritual.
Right, the extra choreography. It's not just standing still. You hear about kids having to hold a single lit candle beneath their chin, which visually casts these massive, distorted shadows upward across the face.
Which is altering your own features before the brain even starts playing tricks on you.
Exactly, and there are variations where you have to prick your finger with a pin to draw a drop of physical blood, like binding yourself to the entity.
Blood magic is a very old trope.
Yeah. And my personal favorite, the absolute most mundane requirement, having to randomly flush the toilet to banish her after she appears.
I love that one. The inclusion of plumbing into a supernatural summoning is fascinating.
It's so funny. But why do they do it?
It highlights a crucial element of childhood psychology. The toilet flush acts as a built-in escape hatch.
Oh, like a safety valve.
Exactly. When children engage in edge play with terror, they need a mechanism to regain control. The flush is a loud, mechanical, highly familiar action. It instantly breaks the tension and signals the end of the ritual. It grounds them back in reality.
So, assuming you follow the recipe, you lock the door, you spin, you stare, you chant, what is the actual payoff? Because the lore is all over the map.
It really is.
Sometimes she's just like a passive, bloodied ghost standing over your shoulder. Sometimes she's a haggard, screaming witch. Sometimes she's a weeping young girl or holding a deceased infant.
Her behaviors are as varied as her appearances. The baseline terror is simply the violation of the reflection,
Right, the shock of seeing someone else where only you should be.
Exactly. But the aggressive strains of the folklore suggest she will reach out of the glass to physically scratch your face.
Yikes.
And some legends claim she will pull you into the mirror, trapping you in the dark reflection while she takes your place in the real world.
Wait, if the potential outcome ranges from getting your face violently clawed up to having your soul dragged into a plumbing-adjacent shadow realm, I find myself really questioning the internal logic of the kids playing this.
Logic isn't usually the primary driver in middle school.
Fair point. But why intentionally seek out an entity whose entire folklore is built around violent retaliation? What is the actual psychological payoff for terrifying yourself?
Well, to understand the psychological payoff, you first have to understand the specific flavor of terror they are trying to invoke. You have to look at the faces history has projected onto that dark mirror.
The entities they believe they are calling upon.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the first historical candidate, Because to make sense of that incredibly brutal "I killed your baby" chant, we have to look at a woman whose life is often reduced to a terrifying internet myth.
But whose actual documented history is a study in profound tragedy.
Yes, and political ruthlessness. We are talking about Mary Tudor, Queen Mary 50s of England.
If you search for the origin of the Bloody Mary legend today, Mary Tudor is the most dominant, algorithm-friendly answer you will find.
SEO loves her.
It really does. She ascended to the English throne in 1553, and her reign, though brief, was defined by a level of state-sponsored violence that permanently branded her in the historical consciousness.
Because she earned the nickname Bloody Mary through a very specific, very horrific campaign, right? The Marian persecutions.
Yes. We are talking about a systemic, legal eradication of religious dissent.
Because Mary was fiercely Catholic, and she was determined to reverse the English Reformation that her father, Henry VIII, had violently set in motion.
The mechanics of those persecutions are essential to understand why her name became synonymous with terror. This wasn't just battlefield violence.
It was personal.
It was intimate, public, and highly ritualized execution. Under Mary's reign, the Heresy Acts were revived. This resulted in an estimated 240 men and 60 women being legally condemned as Protestant heretics.
And the punishment wasn't like a quick beheading, it was being burned alive at the stake.
A horrific way to die.
Unimaginable. Historical accounts from the era describe how the visual horror and the sheer inescapable smell of burning human flesh became a tragic, recurring reality in English towns.
It left a deep generational scar.
Right. So the bloody moniker is historically cemented. But the connection to the Mere ritual goes far beyond her religious purges. It ties deeply into her devastating medical and personal history.
And what's fascinating here is where the historical reality diverges sharply from the simplistic villain narrative.
It's so much sadder than people realize.
It really is. Mary Tudor's life was defined by extreme physiological suffering. Medical historians analyzing her contemporary health records point to symptoms that align heavily with severe endometriosis.
Or potentially pituitary tumors or uterine cancer, right?
Yes. She experienced agonizing, prolonged menstrual cycles and profound reproductive distress.
And in the 1500s, medical science was essentially non-existent regarding women's reproductive health. A condition like severe endometriosis wouldn't have been understood as a biological illness.
It would have been viewed through a lens of suspicion, superstition, and perhaps even divine judgment.
The physical pain she was in must have been unimaginable, compounded by the psychological isolation of her position.
And her psychological isolation began long before she took the throne. Her early life is a masterclass in psychological whiplash.
Because she started out on top.
She did. She was born as the absolute center of King Henry VIII's universe, the beloved, pampered princess, heavily educated and prepared for greatness.
Until Henry realized Mary's mother, Catherine of Aragon, wasn't going to provide him with a male heir.
Right. He becomes infatuated with Anne Boleyn.
And when the Pope refuses to annul his marriage to Catherine, Henry literally shatters the religious foundation of the entire country.
A massive geopolitical shift.
Seriously, he breaks from the Catholic Church, creates the Church of England, and burns down centuries of tradition, basically all for a divorce.
And the collateral damage of that decision fell directly on Mary. Her entire identity was violently stripped away.
She was declared illegitimate by her own father.
Exactly. Her title of princess was revoked. She was separated from her mother, whom she never saw again.
That is heartbreaking.
It gets worse. She was forced into the household of her new infant half-sister, Elizabeth, essentially serving as a glorified attendant to the child who replaced her.
It's a staggering, traumatic fall from grace. She spends years surviving this political minefield, eventually claws her way back to the throne against massive odds, and becomes the first queen regnant of England.
An incredible achievement, objectively.
But even with absolute power, her personal life is incredibly bleak. She secures a marriage to Philip of Spain, which was a strategic alliance with a man who, by all historical accounts, found her entirely unappealing.
He spent almost his entire marriage living abroad and offered her zero emotional support.
Which leads to the most agonizing chapter of her life and the specific historical thread that binds her to the dead baby element of the Mere folklore.
Right. Mary understood that to secure her Catholic legacy and prevent her Protestant half-sister Elizabeth from inheriting the throne, she desperately needed to produce an heir.
But on a deeper human level, She likely just craved the familial love and stability that had been brutally ripped away from her in her youth.
And her desperation was so profound that her body actually manifested the reality she wanted.
This part is so wild.
She suffered from what modern medicine calls pseudocyesis, or phantom pregnancies.
Explain how that works, because it sounds impossible.
It is a rare, severe psychosomatic condition where the brain's overwhelming desire for pregnancy triggers an actual biological cascade.
So her body actually thought she was pregnant.
The biology of a phantom pregnancy is devastating. Mary's endocrine system reacted to her psychological state. Her abdomen swelled significantly. She stopped menstruating.
Oh my gosh.
She experienced morning sickness. She even reported feeling the fetal movements known as quickening. She was entirely physically convinced that she was carrying a child.
So convinced that the royal nurseries were prepared, right?
Announcements were drafted. The entire kingdom was waiting.
But the timeline would stretch. 9 months would pass, then 10, then 11.
And eventually, the swelling would recede.
And the crushing, absolute reality would set in. There was no baby, just an empty, failing body. And she endured this public, humiliating trauma not once, but twice.
It is a profound tragedy. She ultimately died at 42, physically broken, childless, knowing her sister would inherit everything she fought for.
And she's remembered primarily for the smoke and blood of her religious purges.
So when modern teenagers stand in a dark bathroom and chant, "I killed your baby, Bloody Mary,"
Ugh, it's so awful.
they are unwittingly weaponizing the deepest, most agonizing psychological trauma of a 16th century monarch. They are mocking a phantom pregnancy.
But I have to push back on the idea that Mary Tudor has any actual organic connection to this folklore.
How do you mean?
So basically, we took a woman who suffered immense physical and emotional trauma, and centuries later, we turned her trauma into a bathroom jump scare. Like, there is no straight line from a Tudor palace to a modern bathroom mirror, is there?
You're entirely right. There is absolutely no organic connection. Historians and folklorists are unified on this point.
Okay, I thought so.
There is zero historical evidence of anyone during the Tudor period, or even in the centuries immediately following, chanting Mary Tudor's name into mirrors to summon her ghost.
So why her?
The entire association is a modern retroactive phenomenon. The nickname Bloody Mary was simply too perfect to ignore, culturally speaking. When the mirror ritual began to coalesce in the 20th century, the name was a perfect, pre-packaged fit.
It's like blaming a historical figure for a modern internet prank just because their names match. We searched for a suspect to fit a crime that's already been committed and picked the person whose name sounded the most menacing.
That is exactly what happened.
But if Queen Mary I is just a modern misattribution, we need a historical figure whose actual documented crimes match the visceral horror of the legend.
We need someone defined by vanity, physical mutilation, and an obsession with blood.
Exactly. And to find a figure who authentically embodies that specific matrix of horror, we must leave the religious battlegrounds of England and travel to the isolated mountainous regions of late 16th century Hungary.
We have to examine the life of Countess Elizabeth Bathory.
The Blood Countess. I mean, if there is a patron saint of Gothic horror, it's her.
She is certainly the archetype. Born in 1560 into one of the oldest, wealthiest, and most fiercely powerful noble families in Transylvania, the Bathorys essentially operated as independent sovereigns.
Untouchable, basically.
Completely. Elizabeth was married off at a young age to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, another incredibly powerful nobleman who served as the chief commander of the Hungarian troops.
And Nadasdy's military career is the catalyst for everything that follows, right?
It set the stage, yes.
He was known as the Black Knight of Hungary, constantly away at the front lines fighting the Ottoman Empire. This meant that Elizabeth, still a young woman, was left alone to manage massive, sprawling estates.
She was the absolute authority over dozens of castles and thousands of peasants.
And that combination of profound geographical isolation and absolute unchecked feudal power is historically lethal.
It is a recipe for disaster. In the rigid class structure of 16th century Europe, the peasants living on her land were not considered citizens. They were property. Her authority over their lives and bodies was total.
According to the historical testimonies, Elizabeth developed a severe manic obsession with her own physical appearance. She was terrified of aging.
Vanity taken to its darkest extreme.
Right. And this wasn't a situation where she was consulting apothecaries for herbal ointments. The legend states she developed a deeply deranged belief that the key to eternal youth was the physical absorption of life force from the young.
Specifically bathing in the blood of virgin girls.
Which is just, it's horrific.
The logistics of her alleged crimes, as detailed in the massive trove of witness testimonies from her later investigation, are staggering. She utilized her wealth and status to set a trap.
How did she do it?
She would send emissaries into the surrounding impoverished villages, offering young peasant girls employment at the castle. She promised good wages, a safe environment, and the opportunity to learn courtly etiquette.
For a starving peasant family, sending a daughter to the Bathory estate seemed like a miracle.
But they were walking into a localized Holocaust. The testimonies describe an industrial level of sadism. Elizabeth, aided by a small, fiercely loyal inner circle of servants, including her former wet nurse and a local woman rumored to be a witch, subjected these girls to unfathomable torment.
The surviving court documents detail tortures that were designed not for interrogation, but for prolonged, agonizing extraction.
It wasn't about getting information.
No. Girls were beaten severely, burned with hot tongs and irons, forced to stand naked in the freezing snow until they died of exposure, and subjected to intricate mutilations with needles and shears.
And the accounts claim this wasn't a fast death. The victims were kept alive in dungeons and torture chambers for days or weeks, serving as a continuous living reservoir.
And when they finally succumbed, their blood was drained into vats for the Countess's cosmetic use.
And for years, she operated with total impunity. Because in that era, the disappearance of a few hundred peasant girls barely registered on the political radar.
They were invisible.
Completely invisible. But Elizabeth made a fatal, arrogant miscalculation. Her methodology evolved. She began to believe that the blood of the peasantry was somehow inferior, failing to provide the rejuvenating effects she demanded.
So she upgraded. She decided she needed premium blood. She opened an academy within the castle, offering to educate the daughters of the lesser nobility.
And that is when the invisible crime suddenly becomes highly visible.
Because when the daughters of lords and wealthy landowners go missing, or are returned to their families in sealed coffins under suspicious circumstances, the political machinery finally wakes up.
Exactly. The rumors became too loud for the royal court to ignore. In 1610, King Matthias II tasked Elizabeth's own cousin, Count Georgi Thurzo, with investigating the Bathory estates.
Her own cousin.
Yes. And when Thurzo's men, unannounced, raided the castle of Secte, the scene they allegedly discovered was hellish.
What did they find?
They found dead and dying girls scattered throughout the property, some locked in cages, others bearing the horrific marks of prolonged torture.
The investigation collected over 300 witness testimonies. Servants, local villagers, escaping victims.
It was a massive undertaking.
And the final unofficial body count that the investigation arrived at was a staggering 650 victims.
It makes her, potentially, the most prolific female serial killer in recorded human history.
Yet despite the overwhelming evidence and the sheer scale of the atrocity, she never faced a public trial or execution.
Her family's political capital was simply too immense. Executing a Bathory would have caused a massive destabilization of the Hungarian nobility.
So they covered it up.
Thurzo struck a deal. Her accomplices, the servants who carried out her orders, were swiftly tried, tortured, and executed. But Elizabeth was quietly neutralized.
They walled her up alive inside her own bedroom in Secte Castle. Brick by brick, they sealed the doors and windows, leaving only small slits to pass in air and plates of food.
A living tomb.
She lived in total darkness and isolation for 4 years until she was found dead in 1614.
Now, as historical analysts, we must apply a critical lens to this narrative. Because the historical consensus is not entirely unified on this.
There's another angle.
There is a robust counter-theory, supported by several modern scholars, suggesting that the Blood Countess narrative might be a massive politically motivated fabrication.
Wait, really? I struggle to buy that she was entirely framed.
Right.
I mean, how does a conspiracy involving over 300 witness testimonies and hundreds of missing girls stay quiet? You can't just invent a mass grave.
Well, the framing theory relies heavily on the socio-political context of the Habsburg Empire. And to be clear, we are simply reporting on the sources here without endorsing either side of this debate.
Right. We're just looking at the arguments.
The argument is that the Bathory family was incredibly wealthy, arguably wealthier than the king himself, and Elizabeth controlled vast strategic territories.
So she was a threat.
Not just a threat, the king owed her a massive financial debt. By accusing her of heinous satanic crimes, the crown could seize her lands, erase the debt, and neutralize a powerful political rival without having to wage a military campaign against her family.
Follow the money.
Exactly. Under this theory, the witness testimonies were extracted under extreme torture, meaning the servants confessed to whatever Thurzo wanted them to say simply to stop the pain.
Wow. So it's either the true story of history's most brutal serial killer, or it's one of the most successful, vicious political smear campaigns ever orchestrated.
Whichever it is, the impact on folklore is identical.
You look at the Bloody Mary mirror ritual, and the DNA of Elizabeth Bathory is everywhere. The obsession with vanity, the terror of aging, the physical mutilation, and most importantly, the visceral connection to blood.
Her legacy heavily influenced the Gothic literature of the 18th and 19th centuries, feeding directly into European vampire lore.
But wait, her name wasn't even Mary. She's the ultimate horrific skincare routine gone wrong. But how do we get from Elizabeth to Mary?
Right, you run into a glaring nominal issue if you try to link her directly to the mirror ritual.
Because if you're standing in a bathroom in Ohio in 1995, you aren't chanting Bloody Elizabeth.
No, you certainly are not.
How do we cross the bridge from a Hungarian countess to a very specific English-named American sleepover ghost?
We cross that bridge by understanding that folklore is incredibly fluid. It strips away specific historical identities and keeps only the emotional resonance.
So the name doesn't matter to the legend.
Not initially, but to find a true Mary, whose narrative fits the exact mechanics of mirrors, isolation, and child victims, we have to move away from documented royal history entirely.
We're leaving the history books.
We have to venture into the untamed, deeply paranoid landscape of early American and European witchcraft folklore. We must look at the legend of Mary Worth.
Oh, Mary Worth. We are trading the stone castles for a dilapidated cottage deep in the woods.
A classic setting.
The story of Mary Worth is incredibly slippery. Sometimes she is framed as a Puritan in colonial Massachusetts. Other times she's placed in a nameless, medieval European village.
But she represents a very specific, very dangerous archetype. The isolated wise woman.
The hedge witch, or herbalist. In historical village structures, these women occupied a vital but incredibly precarious societal role.
They lived on the physical fringes of the community, usually near the woods.
They possessed crucial knowledge of botany, midwifery, and rudimentary medicine. The village relied on them for survival.
But simultaneously deeply mistrusted them because they operated outside the control of the church and the patriarchal power structures.
So they were the designated scapegoats for any unexplained tragedy. If a crop failed or a child fell ill to a mysterious fever, the blame immediately shifted to the woman in the woods.
And the legend of Mary Worth leans entirely into the darkest fears of that era.
The narrative mirrors the vanity of Bathory but adapts it to a peasant setting, right?
Yes. Mary Worth, aging and marginalized, allegedly discovers a dark, occult method to reverse her aging.
But without the resources to lure servants with wages, she targets the most vulnerable, unprotected demographic available. The children of the village.
It is the ultimate distillation of the stranger danger warning. The folklore says she would lure children who wandered too close to the woods using sweets or simple curiosity.
And once inside her cottage, the trap snapped shut. She utilized their blood in dark, restorative potions.
The escalation of the legend perfectly tracks with the mechanics of a historical witch panic. The village notices the pattern of missing children. Panic ferments into violent action.
A mob forms, armed and terrified, and storms the tree line.
And when they breach her cottage, they don't just find a misunderstood herbalist. They find the folkloric proof of evil, jars of blood, occult symbols, and the remains of the missing children.
And the mob bypasses any legal trial. They drag her from the cottage, tie her to a stake, and burn her alive.
A horrific but common folkloric end.
But it's her final moments, as the flames are rising, that finally lock the last pieces of our modern mirror ritual into place.
Exactly. As she is burning, Mary Worth doesn't just scream in agony. She casts a very specific, targeted curse.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
She binds her spirit to the reflective surfaces, the mirrors of the world. She promises that if anyone is foolish enough to speak her name into the glass, she will cross back over from the dead and inflict the exact same agonizing, burning mutilation upon them.
This legend is the Rosetta Stone for the modern ritual. It explains the mechanics perfectly. You use a mirror because, in historical magical thinking, mirrors aren't just glass, they are liminal spaces.
They are literal doorways between the physical realm and the spiritual realm.
And the chanting of the name is an ancient folkloric mechanic of compulsion. In occult traditions, knowing an entity's true name grants you power over it.
By repeating Mary Worth, or Bloody Mary in the dark, you are not merely inviting her, you are forcefully binding her to the location. You are compelling her to appear.
And the target demographic makes terrifying sense. The kids locking themselves in bathrooms today, mostly middle schoolers, young girls, are the exact same demographic of the children Mary Worth supposedly lured into her cottage.
They are offering themselves up as bait to test the curse.
Isn't Mary Worth just a cautionary tale invented by parents to keep kids from wandering into the woods, which somehow mutated into a mirror ghost?
The legend functions flawlessly as an evolutionary cautionary tale, yes. It begins as a parental warning designed to keep children from wandering into the dangerous, predator-filled woods, and over centuries, it compresses and mutates until the predator isn't in the woods anymore.
The predator lives inside your own house, waiting in the vanity glass.
Exactly.
But witches and castles and stakes still feel a bit removed from our modern reality. They feel like fairy tales. There is a much more modern, localized version of the legend that preys on our very real, everyday anxieties.
We have to look at the modern urban legend of the tragic victim.
Right. This variation focuses not on a powerful villain, but on an ordinary teenage girl who meets a violent end and seeks justice or revenge.
This version represents a fascinating shift in how we process fear. As society became more secular and less afraid of demonic herbalists or cursed royalty, the folklore adapted.
It shifted the identity of Bloody Mary from a malevolent villain to a contemporary teenager whose life was violently interrupted.
The scenarios in this modern iteration are grounded in the grim reality of the nightly news.
Scenario A is the car accident. A local high school girl is driving home late at night on a dangerous winding road. She loses control, the car rolls, and she is killed.
The crucial detail in the lore is that she survives the initial impact but dies frantically trying to claw her way out of the crushed metal and shattered glass.
Which leaves her face horrifically mangled. And that detail is retained to explain the visual presentation of the ghost, why the entity in the mirror appears mutilated and bloody.
But there is a second scenario that is far more insidious.
Scenario B, the deeply disturbing version.
Because it targets our fundamental sense of safety and trust within our own communities.
Right, the abduction scenario. In this version, the girl isn't in a random accident. She is targeted, kidnapped, and assaulted by someone she trusted. Someone in her neighborhood.
And the horror culminates in her being buried alive.
Ugh. The psychological weight of the buried alive trope cannot be overstated. It taps into our most primal, claustrophobic terrors.
The lore specifically details that when her body is eventually recovered, the inside of the coffin lid is covered in deep scratches.
And her fingernails are completely torn away and bloody from her desperate, futile attempts to dig herself out of the dark.
Which is a horrifying image.
I can see exactly why this version sticks with people. It explains why the mirror ghost is famous for violently scratching the face of the summoner.
She isn't a demon trying to steal your soul.
Right. She is a trapped, traumatized spirit, blindly reenacting her final moments of frantic survival on whoever pulls her out of the darkness. This version is like a supernatural neighborhood watch warning.
It is a manifestation of community trauma. Every town has its own tragic history. A fatal accident on a bad stretch of road, a missing person case that shook the neighborhood.
By projecting that local grief onto the Bloody Mary template, the legend becomes intensely personal and terrifying to modern teenagers.
It forces adolescents to confront the reality of random violence and mortality in a controlled mythological format.
We have covered an incredible spectrum of horror here. We've traced the bloodlines of a desperate Tudor queen, the industrial torture of a Hungarian countess, the mob violence of a colonial witch hunt, and the true crime bleakness of a modern murder victim.
It's a heavy list.
But here is the massive, perspective-shattering pivot of this entire deep dive.
What if we have been looking at this completely backwards?
What if the origin of this terrifying, blood-soaked ritual has absolutely nothing to do with horror, vengeance, or death?
To understand the true genesis of the mirror ritual, we have to look past the modern layers of terror and examine the sociological realities of the past.
So, no ghosts.
The original foundational practice that eventually mutated into Bloody Mary was not a summons for a monster. It was an ancient, deeply earnest, and heavily romantic divination ritual.
So the goal wasn't to scare yourself to death. The goal was to catch a fleeting glimpse of your future husband.
Consider the immense socioeconomic pressures placed on young women in the 16th and 17th centuries. Women possessed virtually no agency over their own economic survival or social standing.
The trajectory of a woman's entire life was determined almost exclusively by who she married.
And those marriages were rarely based on romance. They were strategic alliances brokered by parents to consolidate land, wealth, or social status.
So when your entire future is out of your control and the stakes are quite literally survival, you turn to any mechanism that offers a sliver of foresight.
You turn to folk magic. The ritual they performed was intricate and deeply symbolic.
How did it work?
A young unmarried woman would wait until the darkest part of the night, usually around midnight, a classic liminal hour. She would light a single candle.
Okay, setting the mood.
Then she would navigate her home, often walking backward up a flight of stairs, making her way to a room that held a mirror, often a bedroom or a bathroom.
Why the backward walking? I mean, walking backward up a dark staircase holding a candle is a great way to break your neck, not find a husband.
Walking backward is a stable mechanism in global folklore. It is designed to intentionally disorient the practitioner.
Oh, to sort of trick the brain.
By physically moving contrary to the normal flow of human action, you are symbolically stepping outside the normal flow of time and reality. You are entering a liminal state, a threshold where the veil between the present and the future is thin enough to peer through.
So she reaches the room, stands before the mirror in the dark, and holds the candle up.
She doesn't stare directly into her own eyes. She stares over her left shoulder into the deep shadows of the reflection.
And the hope, the desperate, heart-pounding hope, is that the face of the man she is fated to marry will briefly materialize in the glass behind her.
It was an act of grasping for agency in a system that offered none. But folklore always demands a counterbalance. Magic can not only offer good news.
The dark twist.
There was a terrifying caveat built into the divination. If the young woman was fated to die young, if she was destined to perish from illness or tragedy before she ever had the chance to marry, the mirror would not show a man.
The mirror would show a skull. Or the shrouded skeletal figure of the Grim Reaper standing directly behind her.
That image, the sudden, horrifying appearance of death in the reflection instead of love, is the exact seed from which the modern Bloody Mary jump scare grew.
The infrastructure of the terror was already firmly planted in the romantic ritual. So what does this all mean? We took a 17th century supernatural dating app and turned it into a horror movie.
That's a very modern way to put it, but yes.
How does a hopeful, if slightly risky romantic tradition completely devolve into a demonic blood ritual? Who flipped the switch from love to horror?
The switch was flipped by massive theological shifts in European society. As societies became more strictly Christian, the church began a systemic campaign to eradicate local pagan practices and folk magic.
Because claiming you could see the future was encroaching on divine territory. Only God knows the future.
Precisely. If you are predicting the future, you aren't getting that information from heaven. You must be getting it from a darker source.
So the religious authorities demonized the practice. They warned young women that peering into a mirror in the dark wasn't a harmless search for a husband. It was an act of heresy.
It was a direct invitation to demonic forces. Over generations, the cultural understanding of the ritual warped.
The anticipation of seeing a lover was entirely replaced by the dread of summoning a demon.
But the mechanics remained identical. The dark room, the mirror, the candle. Only the psychological intent was inverted from hope to terror.
That is wild. But if this ritual has been performed for centuries, first for love, then for terror, history alone doesn't explain the most stubborn, persistent element of this entire phenomenon.
Which is,
if you talk to adults who played this game as kids, a staggering number of them will look you dead in the eye and swear that they actually saw something impossible in that glass. Are they all just lying to sound cool, or is something else happening?
they are not lying. The experiences they report are entirely genuine.
Wait, really?
Yes. And this is where we pivot from history and folklore into the cold, clinical realm of neurobiology. The visions in the mirror are real, but they are not supernatural.
So what are they?
They are the result of profound, predictable mechanical failures within the human visual system.
Okay, talk to me about the neuroscience of the mirror.
In 2010, an Italian visual researcher named Dr. Giovanni Caputo conducted a groundbreaking mirror experiment to test this exact phenomenon. He decided to take the Bloody Mary legend out of the middle school bathroom and drag it into a controlled laboratory setting.
I love that. What was the setup?
Caputo's methodology was brilliant in its simplicity. He gathered a sample group of 50 individuals, Crucially, these were naive subjects.
Meaning they didn't know what they were testing.
Right. They were unaware of the experiment's premise regarding urban legends, which eliminated the possibility of conscious bias or preconditioned expectations.
He placed each subject alone in a room. The only source of illumination was a single, heavily dimmed 25-watt bulb placed behind the subject, so it cast no direct light on their face.
It's basically the equivalent of a weak nightlight or a single candle.
And he gave them one rigid instruction: stare directly into your own eyes in the mirror for 10 uninterrupted minutes.
And then report exactly what you saw. 10 minutes of unbroken fixation in near total darkness is an absolute eternity for the human visual processing system.
What were the results?
The statistical data that Caputo collected is mind-bending. After just a few minutes, 66% of the participants, 2/3 of the room, reported seeing massive, unsettling deformations of their own face.
Like their features warping or melting.
Exactly, and it escalates rapidly from there. 18% of the subjects reported that their face vanished entirely and was replaced by the faces of their parents, some of whom were deceased.
That is so creepy.
Another 28% saw the faces of absolute strangers staring back at them. 28% reported seeing archetypal faces, like an old woman, a young child, or an ancestor.
And then the brain really starts to break down, right?
Yes. 18% saw animal faces seamlessly superimposed over their own: cats, pigs, lions.
Wow.
And the final statistic, the one that completely validates the Bloody Mary legend: 48% of the subjects, nearly half of the people in the experiment, reported seeing fantastical, monstrous, or explicitly evil beings manifesting in the mirror.
That is incredible. So Caputo published his findings, and he coined a clinical term for this specific visual hallucination, right?
He called it the dissociative identity effect. We have empirical, peer-reviewed data proving that if you stare into a mirror in the dark, your brain will conjure monsters.
I need you to explain the mechanics of this. How does a healthy human brain suddenly decide it's looking at a lion or a demon just because the lights are low?
It involves a combination of neurological phenomena, primarily driven by something called Troxler fading, or neural adaptation.
What does that mean for our eyes?
To understand it, you have to understand that your vision isn't like a video camera passively recording the world. Your brain is actively, constantly constructing the image you see based on the data sent by your eyes.
And facial recognition is basically the most advanced software running on that hardware, right?
Yeah.
We are biologically hardwired to instantly recognize faces.
Yes. But that highly advanced facial recognition software requires clear, well-lit, high-resolution data to function.
Which you don't have in a dark bathroom.
Exactly. When you lock your focus on a single point, like your own eyes in the mirror, the neurons in your retina that are processing the unchanging peripheral details of your face literally become exhausted.
They just get tired.
They deplete their light-sensitive chemicals and stop firing. They stop sending data to the brain.
So the image actually begins to fade away.
The peripheral image washes out, but the visual cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rendering the image, panics. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the visual cortex absolutely refuses to accept blank, missing data.
So it guesses.
It attempts to artificially fill in the missing pixels.
Wait, so the ghost isn't in the mirror. The ghost is a glitch in our own mental software. We are essentially gaslighting our own brains.
That is an excellent way to phrase it. The brain engages in predictive rendering, but because it lacks current visual data, it queries other regions of the brain for reference material.
Where does it look?
It pulls from your memory centers. It pulls from your amygdala, which is the emotional and fear processing center.
Oh no.
The brain takes the shadowy, distorted remnants of your face and aggressively paints a new identity over it, using your own memories, expectations, and subconscious fears as the paint.
So if you walk into that bathroom deeply terrified of a witch with a scratched face, your visual cortex will literally render a witch onto your reflection. The monster you see is fundamentally a reflection of your own internal psychological state.
Precisely. You are facing an avatar built from your own internal state. The Caputo experiment completely demystifies the how of the legend. It provides the biological blueprint of the hallucination.
But understanding the brain glitch explains how the trick works. It doesn't explain why we keep subjecting ourselves to it generation after generation.
Right. If the ritual reliably produces terrifying hallucinations, why has it remained an enduring staple of adolescent culture?
To understand that, we must look at who is actually playing this game. As we noted earlier, the demographic is almost always middle school or early high school kids.
Right. Which is arguably the most volatile, liminal stage of human development.
Enter the folklorists.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can turn to the work of prominent folklorist Alan Dundas. Dundas suggests the ritual is deeply connected to the anxieties of adolescence, specifically the transition into womanhood.
The demographic is young kids navigating intense physical and psychological changes. And the symbolism is almost overwhelming once you look for it.
It really is.
We start with the setting. The bathroom isn't just a dark room. It is an intimate space where kids are forced to privately confront their changing bodies.
And the mirror represents identity formation, but it is heavily burdened with insecurity, self-doubt, and the terrifying pressure of societal expectations regarding appearance.
And then there is the inescapable motif of blood. The Blood Countess bathing in it, Mary Worth draining it, the modern victim covered in it. Dundas points out that this is not a coincidence, right?
No, not at all. For young girls in that specific age bracket, blood represents life, death, menstruation, and childbirth. It represents biological maturity.
Bloody Mary herself embodies the complexity of womanhood, the promise of gaining power mixed with the fear of facing new dangers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bloody Mary isn't just a ghost story. She is a rite of passage disguised as a game.
A test.
Yes, it is a culturally sanctioned way for adolescents to test their courage in a safe but thrilling environment.
Think about when you were that age, trying to prove you were brave enough to face the dark. Is summoning Bloody Mary basically a dress rehearsal for facing the terrifying uncertainties of growing up?
It is a controlled simulation of trauma. Adolescents desperately need mechanisms to test their boundaries and confront their fears in a way that feels incredibly high stakes, but is ultimately physically safe.
They can stand at the edge of the abyss, experience genuine neurological terror, and the moment it becomes too much, they can simply flip the light switch.
They break the illusion and immediately return to the safety of the mundane world. They confront the monster, realize the monster is merely themselves, and they survive.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. We started standing in a cramped, dark bathroom, dissecting the precise acoustic and sensory architecture of a supernatural summoning.
We waded through the incredibly heavy, tragic history of Queen Mary Tudor, examining how her chronic pain and devastating phantom pregnancies were cruelly co-opted by modern myths.
We traveled to the isolated, blood-soaked estates of Elizabeth Bathory to debate the line between prolific serial murder and massive political conspiracy.
We tracked the evolution of folklore, moving from the mob justice of Mary Worth the Hedge Witch to the suffocating true crime terror of modern victims buried alive.
We uncovered the historically poignant origins of the practice, revealing how a desperate romantic search for a future husband in the 17th century was systematically demonized into a horror ritual.
And finally, we broke down the literal glitches of the human brain. We explored the Caputo experiment, Troxler fading, and the brain's terrifying ability to aggressively paint our darkest fears over our own faces.
All serving as a psychological dress rehearsal for the chaotic transition into adulthood. It is a profound intersection of history, neurobiology, and cultural anxiety.
It really, really is.
But before we sign off today, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. A thought that might linger the next time you find yourself alone, washing your hands in a dimly lit bathroom, and you glance up at the glass.
A parting gift for the listener.
Exactly. We've established that this ritual is a test of courage. We owe the science of how the image distorts. But perhaps the real reason we are so deeply, viscerally unsettled by this game isn't the fear that a 400-year-old witch is going to reach out and pull us into the dark.
No.
Maybe when you stare into that dim mirror and you watch your own familiar, trusted features begin to melt and dissolve into something unrecognizable and monstrous, maybe your true ultimate fear is the sudden, jarring realization of just how incredibly fragile your own identity actually is. That the face you present to the world, the person you believe yourself to be, is just a precarious neurological illusion. And that it only takes 10 minutes in the dark to lose yourself entirely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and remember to keep questioning the stories you tell in the dark.
Imagine buying the perfect plot of land for your family's dream home, and it's an absolute steal. You break ground for the foundation, the workers start digging, and your shovels hit bone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and not just one skeleton, dozens of them, just the literal mass grave of murdered farmers. So what do? Do you halt the project, call the police, walk away, or do you light some incense, cover those bones right back up with dirt, and build your children's bedrooms directly on top of them.
I mean, it sounds like an impossible choice, right?
Yeah.
Or rather, a choice no sane person would ever make. But history, and specifically the history of family empires, is built almost entirely on the latter. We are just incredibly adept at ignoring the grotesque if the price is right.
And that is exactly where we are going today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, by the way. Today we are unpacking a multi-generational saga that sits right at this terrifying intersection of real estate, family ambition, and folklore.
It's such a fascinating case.
It really is. We are looking at a story shared by a woman named Pamela, whose family compound is located near Belur Math in West Bengal. Her account was featured on the YouTube channel Maroon Files. And, it is way less of a standard ghost story and more of this brutal case study in cognitive dissonance.
Right, and historical violence, and how families will just justify ignoring massive red flags in the pursuit of wealth. The psychology of this is what makes it so compelling to me.
Completely.
We're going to look at what happens when modern expansion collides with ancient, established ecosystems. And it starts with that exact scenario you just posed, the bargain and the bones.
Let's get right into the dirt then. So we go back a few generations to Pamela's great-grandfather. He's looking for a large parcel of land to establish a multi-generational family compound.
A legacy project, essentially.
Exactly. He finds this massive property being sold by a widow. She is desperate for cash, and she offers him the land at just a staggeringly low price. It's an undeniable bargain. He buys it, brings in the workers, and they start excavating the soil to lay the foundation.
And this is where the reality check happens.
Right. Immediately, they find numerous human skeletons. And the deeper they dig, the more bones they find.
Which forces a massive psychological crisis for the great-grandfather, because he has already mentally spent the currency of this land. He has visualized the estate, the status, the whole legacy.
Yeah.
So finding a literal mass grave is a catastrophic disruption to that vision.
Right. And you would think the survival instinct kicks in right here, like the deal is off, I'm out. But he doesn't walk away. He theorizes, rather conveniently I might add, that it must just be an old, forgotten cemetery.
Of course, a rationalization.
Right, so he hires a local priest, does a quick cleansing ritual of puja, and orders the workers to keep building. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. It's like buying a used car, popping the trunk, finding it completely full of bloody clothes, and deciding to just hang a pine-scented air freshener from the rearview mirror because, hey, the gas mileage is so incredible.
That is a perfect analogy.
Why do we let economic value override our basic survival instincts? Like, why do we do that?
Well, it's a mechanism called the normalization of deviance. When a massive warning sign like digging up human remains presents itself, but doesn't immediately result in your own death or financial ruin, the human brain begins to reset its baseline.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The great-grandfather didn't just ignore the bones. His brain actively recategorized a mass grave as an acceptable baseline condition because the financial reward triggered such an overwhelming dopamine response.
Wow.
The puja he performs isn't actually about spiritual cleansing at all.
It's an administrative fix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a metaphysical band-aid applied to a physical mass grave. It allows him to tick a box that says, problem addressed, without ever actually investigating the problem. Because if he investigates, he loses the cheap land.
And if he had investigated, he would have found out what the local villagers already knew, because this wasn't a peaceful cemetery. Pamela's family later learned the dark truth about this soil. Before the widow owned it, this exact land was the headquarters for 4 brutal predatory loan sharks.
Yeah, and we really need to contextualize what a rural loan shark was in this era. We were talking about a time in regional India with incredibly lax police regulations.
Right, no proper oversight.
None. There was no centralized banking for poor farmers, and local law enforcement was either non-existent or easily bribed. So these 4 men operated essentially as a localized cartel with absolute impunity.
They would lend money to desperate farmers at astronomically high interest rates. And when the farmers inevitably defaulted, these men didn't just repossess their carts, they murdered them.
Brutally.
They killed these farmers, dragged their bodies back to this large property, and buried them in the dirt. That is what the great-grandfather was digging up, the victims of systematic, horrific financial violence.
And this introduces the concept of psychogeography into our deep dive. The idea that trauma embeds itself into the physical landscape. The soil of this property wasn't just dirt. It was saturated with profound injustice, fear, and unresolved violence.
Like it's radioactive.
Exactly. By building on top of it, the great-grandfather was physically anchoring his family's legacy into a foundation of generational trauma. He essentially grafted his family tree onto a root system of murder.
It makes you think. Look at your own workplace or family. How often do you slap a quick administrative fix over a toxic foundation just hoping it holds, simply because doing the actual excavation would be too costly? That is the original sin of this family.
Right.
But they build the house anyway, they establish the compound, and we have to look at what else is growing out of this deeply contaminated soil.
Right.
Because there is a massive, ancient neem tree on the property, right next to an old well.
Which is key here. The neem tree, Azadirachta indica, is incredibly significant in South Asian culture. It has potent medicinal properties. I mean, its leaves are used for everything from treating infections to pest control. But spiritually, it is often viewed as a boundary marker, a sacred entity that houses regional deities or spirits.
But the dynamic here is strange. Pamela's family, the landowners, they pretty much ignore the tree. But a neighboring family, headed by a barber, regularly crosses the property line, comes into the compound, and actively worships this specific neem tree.
Just walks right in.
Yeah. They light incense, chant mantras, fold their hands in reverence, and Pamela's family just tolerates it. They figure, let them practice their faith.
Which establishes a highly specific spiritual ecosystem.
And a very lucrative one for the neighbor. Because according to Pamela's grandmother, this simple barber experiences an explosion of inexplicable prosperity. He goes from cutting hair to building 2 massive factories.
It's a huge leap in status.
He becomes staggeringly wealthy. And the grandmother explicitly attributes this to the supernatural grace of that specific neem tree. The neighbor worships the tree, and the tree makes him rich. Wait, I'm struggling to understand something here.
Okay, what is it?
If this tree is so phenomenally powerful that it can generate million-dollar factories for a neighbor, why is Pamela's family, the people who actually own the dirt it grows in, just sitting around? Why aren't they worshiping it and getting rich too?
Because spiritual symbiosis isn't dictated by property deeds. It requires active engagement. Think of the ancient neem tree as a massive spiritual grounding rod. We just established that the soil is highly radioactive with the trauma of murdered farmers, right?
Right.
The tree isn't just sitting there doing nothing. It is actively drawing up and containing that violent ambient energy. The neighbor recognizes this immense power source and approaches it with deep reverence and specific ritualistic engagement. He's essentially tapping into that energy for prosperity.
Like plugging into a generator.
Exactly. Pamela's family, however, merely tolerates the tree. The relationship is passive, so their reward is passive. They get to live on top of a mass grave without being immediately destroyed by it.
Wow.
The tree contains the horror, the neighbor feeds the tree with devotion, and the landowners provide the space. It's a perfect, delicate equilibrium.
But ecosystems only survive if nothing demands more space. And that brings us to the generational shift, and the exact moment this delicate balance begins to crack. Pamela's father, who is the eldest of 3 brothers, gets married. It's a love marriage, which is an important detail. And he decides to build a small, separate house for his new bride within the family compound.
And let me guess where he built it.
Right in the corner, immediately adjacent to the massive neem tree and the well.
He physically encroaches on the spiritual epicenter of the property. So the architecture of the compound is shifting from passive tolerance to active spatial dominance.
And almost immediately after they move into this encroaching structure, the horror begins. But it doesn't happen to the father. It happens exclusively to the new bride, Pamela's mother.
The outsider.
Yes. Almost every night around 2 a.m., she starts hearing a woman crying loudly by the well. Then the sensory intrusions escalate. She feels a dense, heavy air suffocating her bedroom. She starts smelling a horrific, foul odor emanating from the corner of her room.
Notice the deep isolation of her experience here. No one else hears the crying. No one else smells the rot.
It's just her. She goes to her mother-in-law, absolutely terrified, and says, there is something in this house. I smell rot. I hear a woman weeping. And the mother-in-law completely dismisses her. She says, oh, it's just your imagination. You're a new bride. You just need time to adjust to our family.
That dismissal isn't just a lack of empathy, by the way. It is a vital defensive mechanism of the joint family structure. You have to analyze this sociologically.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In a traditional joint household, a new daughter-in-law entering via a love marriage has the absolute lowest social capital. She is an outsider who has bypassed the traditional arranged integration.
She's a foreign body entering an established organism.
Precisely.
Right.
And this established organism, the family, has survived for generations on top of a graveyard by developing a collective psychological blindness. They've evolved an immune response to the trauma in the soil. When the new bride senses the horror and vocalizes it, she is actively threatening the family's survival mechanism.
Oh, I see.
The mother-in-law's gaslighting is an immune response. She must invalidate the bride's reality to protect the family's manufactured blindness.
It's incredibly tragic when you think about it. The ghost doesn't attack the men building the house. The entity targets the weakest link in the family's shield of denial. Because the mother hasn't learned how to filter out the horror yet, her nervous system is completely raw.
Right.
So while the family tells her the air is clean, her physical health begins to rapidly deteriorate. She loses weight. She becomes incredibly weak.
Because you cannot medicate away a supernatural intrusion. And you certainly cannot survive the profound psychological torture of being systematically disbelieved by the people who are supposed to protect you. She is completely isolated in a localized nightmare.
And that slow burn of psychological distress eventually erupts into visceral physical horror. We move forward to August. Pamela's mother is now 8 months pregnant with Pamela. It is the middle of the day, and a severe, violent thunderstorm rolls in, pouring rain, lightning. The mother is sitting by the window that frames the neem tree, trying to read.
And the weather is key here.
Yeah, she glances out through the storm, and she sees a woman standing directly under the tree.
The atmospheric pressure of a thunderstorm is rarely just a backdrop in these accounts. Extreme weather acts as a catalyst. It thins the veil between realities, providing the kinetic energy necessary for an entity to manifest solidly in the physical world.
The mother leans closer to the glass, and the woman suddenly appears right in front of her, separated only by the window pane. And the visual is pure nightmare fuel. Pamela describes it explicitly. 80% of this woman's body is covered in horrific, raw burns.
God.
Where her eyes should be, there are only deep black holes. Her wet hair is plastered to her ruined face, and she isn't looking at the mother's face. She is staring with intense, unblinking focus directly at the mother's 8-month pregnant stomach.
We need to unpack the symbolism of that gaze, because it is the linchpin of the whole generational narrative. You have an entity that physically embodies violent destruction, the burns, the hollow eyes, and it is fixing his gaze entirely on the unborn child.
It gives me chills.
It is the literal visual manifestation of generational trauma. It is the buried violence of the land looking directly at the future of the family and declaring, I am already a part of your bloodline.
The mother is paralyzed. She tries to scream, but she can't even breathe. The window is the only barrier. And as this burned entity stares into her stomach, the mother is suddenly hit with a sharp, agonizing abdominal pain. It's so severe, it finally tears a scream out of her throat.
The tension breaks.
The exact moment she screams, the burned entity vanishes into the storm. And that very night, Pamela is born.
The immediate causality is terrifying. The entity's attention literally forces the biological trigger of birth. It is a violent, premature eviction into the world.
It's a deeply traumatic entrance, but miraculously, Pamela is born healthy. The mother survives the birth. And strangely, after this terrifying climax, the immediate horror seems to recede. The heady air lifts, the crying stops, the family falls back into their routine, assuming whatever it was has passed.
Well, they assume it has passed because the fundamental ecosystem hasn't been destroyed yet. The tree is still standing. The well is intact. The boundaries are stretched and strained by the new house, but the containment field hasn't completely broken.
But the fatal flaw of this family isn't just ignorance, it's ambition. We move forward to the year 2010. Pamela is now 8 years old. Her father and his 2 brothers look at their compound and decide they aren't satisfied. They want more.
Of course they do.
They want to add second floors, push out the walls, build a massive, modern mansion. They confuse spiritual tolerance with environmental dominance.
They want to formalize their control over the landscape.
So they bring in a civil engineer. He surveys the land, draws up modern blueprints, and delivers a verdict. He tells the brothers, if you want this massive expansion, there is a structural obstacle. The neem tree is in the way of the construction line. You cannot build this specific blueprint unless you cut it down.
This is the critical collision point. You have modern structural logic. The engineer who only sees a piece of wood occupying cubit footage crashing headlong into ancient, localized reality. The blueprint cannot account for the decades of worship, the neighbor's industrial wealth, or the mass grave the tree is actively suppressing.
This engineer's recommendation triggers an all-out war within the family. It fractures them. Pamela's elder uncle immediately vetoes the idea. He refuses to touch the tree. He argues they should build around it, respecting the neighbor's faith, and an intuitive sense that the tree offers a silent protection.
He respects the balance.
Exactly. Word even reaches the wealthy neighbor family. The elderly grandmother of that family literally runs into Pamela's compound, throws herself in front of the grandfather, weeping with folded hands, begging them not to cut it down.
Think about the absolute desperation of that act. A wealthy, high-status woman throwing herself at the feet of her neighbors. She knows exactly what engine is running inside that tree, and she knows that destroying the engine will cause the entire system to explode.
But Pamela's father and the younger uncle are vehemently pro-removal. They look at the weeping neighbor and the terrified elder brother, and they dismiss them entirely because the blueprint validates their ambition. And when you ignore a quiet warning, the universe tends to turn up the volume.
The escalation from verbal pleas to physical tragedies.
Right in the middle of this intense family war over the tree, the grandfather, the patriarch who originally bought the bloody land, suddenly dies.
A deeply destabilizing event. It removes the foundational authority and shifts the power dynamics entirely to the warring brothers.
And if that wasn't enough, 3 months later, a bizarre, violent accident occurs. The younger uncle, the one allied with the father to cut the tree, is playing a casual game of local football. A ball is kicked with such intense force and at such an impossible angle that it strikes him directly in his left eye. He's carried home bleeding profusely. The doctors tell him the eye is permanently, irreparably destroyed.
It is a literal blinding, a physical manifestation of their spiritual loss of vision.
You would look at this sequence of events. Your dad dies. Your brother gets his eye violently exploded by a football right as you are fighting to destroy a sacred tree. And you would think, okay, the universe is sending a very loud message. I am going to back off.
That requires a mechanism of humility that the father simply does not possess.
He does the exact opposite. He doubled down. He twists these tragedies into a justification for war. He becomes enraged, explicitly blaming the tree for his father's death and his brother's destroyed eye. He states, "No matter what, I will have it cut down." It's madness.
It is a profound, albeit destructive, psychological defense mechanism. The father is experiencing acute grief and shock, but he cannot punch a rogue football, and he cannot yell at human mortality. So his brain channels all of that impotent rage and projects it onto the only immovable object in his yard. The tree stops being an obstacle to a bigger house. It becomes the enemy that killed his father. He manufactures a vendetta to regain a sense of control.
Under the sheer force of irrational rage, the elder uncle finally breaks. He realizes he can't stop the father. But he begs for one final concession. He demands they bring in a priest to perform a consultation and a proper ritual before the saws come out, hoping to mitigate the disaster.
He is retreating to the exact same administrative fix his grandfather used. He thinks a ritual can negotiate with a bulldozer.
The father and the one-eyed younger uncle go hunting for a priest who will give them permission. They finally find a lead priest who arrives with an entourage of 4 others. They examine the tree, and the lead priest declares there is a woman's spirit residing inside this neem tree. Before removal, you must perform a massive heaven, a large fire sacrifice, and all 3 brothers must participate to pacify the entity.
We really need to understand the mechanics of a heaven in this context. It is not just lighting a fire. It's an intricate ritual where specific offerings, ghee, grains, herbs are burned, while precise mantras are chanted. The belief is that the fire acts as a conduit, and the smoke carries the binding intentions of the mantras to the spiritual realm.
So it's like a spiritual contract.
It is an attempt to legally, spiritually evict the entity before destroying its home.
But Pamela's mother, the woman who was terrorized by the burned entity years ago, watches these priests set up the fire, and she is incredibly skeptical. She feels deep in her gut that these men are frauds. She suspects they're just witch doctors who smelled a wealthy, desperate family and are putting on a theatrical fire show to swindle them for a massive payout.
Which is a fascinating cognitive pivot. The mother experienced undeniably supernatural trauma. She knows exactly what is out there. Yet when faced with the structured ritual of these priests, her modern rational mind kicks back in.
She doubts it.
We will constantly try to find a logical, cynical explanation for this supernatural, like a financial scam, right up until the exact moment the horror becomes completely undeniable again.
She warns her husband, but he ignores her. The Grand Havan is performed, the smoke clears, and a week later, the fatal blow is struck. The father and the younger uncle bring in the tools, and they violently cut the ancient, massive neem tree down to a jagged stump.
They crossed the Rubicon. They didn't just remove wood, they ripped out the grounding wire. The entity is now displaced.
The retaliation doesn't take years to manifest. It takes hours. That very night, 8-year-old Pamela is asleep in her room with her parents. In the dead of night, she is jolted awake by 2 incredibly loud, distinct knocks on her solid bedroom door. Her parents don't wake up. Dazed, she walks to the door, opens it, and finds the hallway completely empty.
The entity is testing the perimeter of the new architecture.
The very next night, Pamela is asleep again. She suddenly wakes up in the pitch black, her eyes locked on the bedroom door, just waiting. The handle slowly turns, the door swings open entirely on its own, and a figure walks into her bedroom.
This is where it gets so chilling.
It is a young boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old, wearing a traditional dhoti. Pamela is frozen in absolute terror. She watches as this boy deliberately walks across her room, ignoring her completely, and stops right in front of the window. The exact same window her mother looked out of years ago.
Notice the subversion of the imagery here. A dhoti is a traditional, unstitched white garment, often associated with purity, ritual, and innocence. But here the innocence is deeply corrupted by the context of the intrusion.
The boy stands there for 3 agonizing seconds, staring out into the dark. And he isn't looking at the sky. He is staring directly down at the jagged stump of the cut neem tree. And then he simply vanishes into thin air.
Why does an ancient, terrifying force, capable of generating massive wealth and manifesting as a burned woman, choose to appear to an 8-year-old girl as a grieving child?
It's so unsettling.
It is a manifestation of profound mourning. The boy is standing at the window, looking at the ruins of his sanctuary. To the father, the tree was cubic footage in the way of a blueprint. To the entity, it was home. The family effectively rendered an ancient force homeless. And a displaced, grieving force is the most dangerous kind of force.
Pamela screams her lungs out. Her parents wake up in a panic. She tries to explain the boy staring at the stump, but the cycle of denial continues. They tell her it was a bad dream and force her back to sleep. They cannot afford to believe her because believing her means admitting they made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake.
Right, they're in too deep now.
But the ecosystem is broken and the fallout crashes down on the house. Pamela is struck with a sudden, raging high fever. Her little 3-year-old brother begins waking up every single night, crying uncontrollably. When the parents rush in, they find the toddler standing by the window, staring out into the darkness at the stump, weeping.
The children are always the most sensitive receptors to the shifting atmospheric pressure of a haunting. They bear the immediate brunt of the spiritual fallout.
When this becomes a nightly occurrence, the father finally gets rattled, but he still refuses to admit culpability. Instead, he goes to a local cleric, gets some holy amulets, and ties them around the kid's arms, hoping it will just block out the noise.
Another superficial band-aid over a severed artery.
Because the expansion must continue. The construction pushes forward. We move into 2011, going into 2012. The grand new mansion is finally completed. The father has gotten exactly what he wanted. He has bulldozed nature, ignored the warnings, and built his monument.
And this is where the final unraveling begins, the climax of the tragedy.
Just a week after the final construction finishes, Pamela's father notices a small, seemingly innocent wound inside his mouth. He assumes he bit his cheek or got an insect bite while sleeping. He ignores it. But a few days later, he is accompanying his wife to a skin doctor for a minor rash she developed. While in the clinic, Pamela's mother, driven by a sudden, intense intuition, insists he show the doctor this little wound in his mouth.
Her intuition is sharp. She knows the retaliation won't be confined to bumps in the night. The haunting is going to become biological.
The doctor shines a light into the father's mouth, looks at the wound, and his casual demeanor instantly vanishes. He becomes deadly serious. He tells the father, "This does not look normal at all. I'm referring you immediately to a specialized hospital in Kolkata. Do not delay. Go tomorrow."
That's terrifying.
They go home deeply unsettled. And that very night, Pamela's mother has a dream that will permanently fracture her psyche.
This is the introduction of prophetic horror.
She dreams she is standing in her bedroom. The 10-year-old boy in the dhoti is standing right in front of her, but he isn't mourning the stump anymore. He is looking directly into her eyes and he is laughing.
Yeah.
A strange, mocking, horrific laugh. And as he laughs, she looks down and sees her husband, Pamela's father, sitting on the ground, violently vomiting massive amounts of dark blood.
It isn't just a nightmare. It is a preview of an inescapable reality. It is the entity showing her the exact blueprint of its vengeance.
She wakes up terrified and forces her husband to the Kolkata hospital the next morning. They run the biopsies, they do the scans, and the doctor delivers the diagnosis. It isn't a bug bite, it is stage 2 cancer in the mouth. It is incredibly aggressive, and they need to schedule surgery immediately.
The grim irony of this specific affliction cannot be overstated.
It is staggering. Think about it. The father used his mouth, His voice, his absolute uncompromising stubbornness to yell down his elder brother, to dismiss the weeping neighbor, to demand the destruction of the tree. His voice was the instrument of his hubris. And the entity strikes him exactly there, a wound in his mouth that begins to rapidly consume him.
It is deeply poetic in the darkest possible way. The universe is enacting a highly specific, localized vengeance.
And the true horror of the next few months is the utter helplessness. The doctors schedule surgeries, they plan radiation, but Pamela's source material details this agonizing, impossible cycle. Every single time the father goes to the hospital for a scheduled treatment, something inexplicable goes wrong.
The interference begins.
The hospital machinery suddenly breaks down. His vitals inexplicably drop too low for anesthesia to be administered. The operation fails. The treatment is endlessly delayed.
Modern medicine is completely short-circuiting in the face of this ancient curse. The blueprints of the hospital are as useless as the blueprints of the house.
And every single time a medical intervention fails, Pamela's mother has the exact same dream. The boy in the doty appears. And every time they are sent home without a cure, the boy's mocking laughter in her dream grows louder, more dominant, more terrifying.
This is the absolute zenith of psychological torture. She is trapped in a prophetic loop. She knows exactly what the horrific, bloody outcome will be, yet she has to endure the daily, agonizing hope of medical intervention, only to watch it fail exactly as the boy promised it would. She is a hostage to the inevitable.
It all culminates on June 9th, 2012. The father is in his bedroom, getting ready to go to the hospital for yet another desperate attempt at treatment. Suddenly, he stumbles. He reaches out and grabs onto the windowsill, the exact same window overlooking the jagged stump. He loses his grip and slides down into a sitting position on the floor. And suddenly, violently, he begins vomiting massive, unimaginable amounts of blood from his mouth directly onto the floor right in front of his horrified wife. He dies instantly.
Oh my God. The prophecy is fulfilled down to the exact physical geometry of the dream. He dies sitting on the ground, purging his lifeblood, while the mother watches, utterly powerless to stop it.
The father is gone. His ambition built the massive house, but the cost of the blueprint was his life. The mother is devastated. She weeps, screaming prayers to Goddess Kali, asking, "Why did this happen? What mistake did I make?" But the curse isn't finished. The father was the primary target, but the displaced entity is still homeless, and it is still raging.
The shockwave of the severed tree continues to move through the remaining architecture of the family.
Just weeks after the funeral, Pamela's younger brother develops severe, uncontrollable asthma. His airways are violently constricting. They rush him to specialists, but no modern medication opens his lungs. He's slowly suffocating. At the same time, the boy in the doty begins appearing in the mother's dreams again. She is paralyzed by the realization that the entity is now coming to drown her son in his own lungs, just like it drowned her husband in his own blood.
And the perimeter shrinks further when Pamela herself is struck down.
Yes. Pamela's health drastically plummets. She contracts double typhoid. Her immune system completely collapses, and she is ordered on strict, absolute bed rest. Both of her children are now critically ill, fading fast in this massive, cursed house. The mother is broken. She realizes that no oncologist, no pulmonologist, no cleric with a string amulet can stop what is happening. She has to bypass modern logic entirely. She completely surrenders herself in deep, desperate prayer to Goddess Kali.
She seeks an intervention from a higher, older authority. She abandons the arrogance of her husband's generation and returns to absolute submission.
And an answer comes. One night, a woman wearing a vibrant red sari appears in the mother's dream. The woman doesn't offer a complex, expensive fire ritual. She doesn't demand a blood sacrifice. She looks at the mother and simply says one sentence: plant a small neem tree in its place.
A profound instruction in its utter simplicity. The solution wasn't destruction, it was restoration.
The very next morning, the mother goes out, procures a small neem sapling, and plants it directly into the soil where the old, massive stump was. And she doesn't just plant it and walk away hoping for the best. She treats this tiny sapling with absolute desperate devotion. Pamela notes that her mother cared for this plant as if she were caring for a third, critically ill child. She cleans the area around it meticulously every day. She offers incense. She waters it with her own hands, kneeling in the dirt.
She is engaged in active, daily atonement. She's attempting to meticulously rebuild the habitat they so violently destroyed. It is the ultimate act of humility.
And the results are miraculous. As the sapling takes root in that dark soil and begins to grow under her intense devotion, the shadow over the house finally begins to lift. The younger brother's terrifying asthma suddenly becomes manageable. His airways open up. Pamela successfully fights off the double typhoid and recovers, and that dense, heavy, rotting air that had plagued the mother for years finally dissipates from the home.
It is an incredible resolution, because it wasn't about hiring a stronger priest to defeat or banish the spirit. It wasn't an exorcism where the human triumphs over the demon. It was an apology, rebuilding the home you destroyed to restore the equilibrium.
But the mother still needs to understand the mechanics of what just decimated her family. Who was the boy in the Dodi? She travels to a very famous ancient Kali temple and secures an audience with the head priest. She lays out the entire multi-generational saga, the cheap land, the skeletons of the loan shark victims, the neighbor's wealth, the burned woman, the engineer's blueprint, the cut tree, the boy, the blood, and the new sapling.
And the priest provides the final piece of the theological and folklore puzzle.
He listens to her story and says, "The child you saw, that was the Brahmadaitya." We need to deeply explore this because the Brahmadaitya is not your standard run-of-the-mill wandering ghost. The priest explains that this is an incredibly ancient, immensely powerful class of spirit within Bengali folklore.
Yes, the lore surrounding the Brahmadaitya is intense and highly specific. They are considered the spirits of learned Brahmin scholars or priests who died unmarried or under unnatural circumstances. Because of their caste and their knowledge in life, their spirits retain immense intellect and staggering supernatural power in death. They are fiercely territorial, and they specifically choose to reside in massive old trees, particularly banyan and neem trees.
The priest tells her plainly, "You destroyed his habitat. That is the sole reason for the absolute massacre of your family's health and happiness. And because it is a Brahmadaitya, it is far too powerful to be controlled by human arrogance. Those priests your husband hired for the grand fire ritual, they couldn't bind him. No normal puja, no standard Havan can control an entity of that magnitude."
He clarifies a crucial distinction there. The entity wasn't evil in a cartoonish, malicious sense. It was a force of nature, an apex predator of the spiritual ecosystem that had been violently provoked and rendered homeless.
The priest continues, "Goddess Kali intervened and directed you to reestablish the Brahmadaitya's home. You did exactly that. Today, that exact same incredibly powerful spirit now resides inside that small, new neem sapling you planted. If you continue to worship it, to care for it, his blessings will slowly return to your home." The priest even connects this to a broader regional concept, mentioning local entities like Burm Baba, where ancient trees are worshipped because people acknowledge the massive regional power of these specific Brahma demons.
This revelation connects every single thread of the story in a beautifully terrifying, cohesive mechanism. Think back to the very beginning, the absurdly cheap land, the mass grave of the loan shark's victims. The soil was steeply saturated in horrific violence, fear, and unrest. The original ancient neem tree didn't just happen to be there, it acted as a massive spiritual anchor. It was the grounding rod that held all that dark, buried trauma in check while housing the Brahmadaitya.
And the neighbor understood the physics of that arrangement. He tapped into that immense ambient power through worship and got incredibly rich.
Exactly. But when Pamela's father arrogantly cut down the anchor to build his second floor, all the protection evaporated. The Brahmadaitya, furious at its eviction, utilized the latent, bloody violence of the land itself to enact a brutal vengeance. The universe demanded that the balance be restored, and because the father initiated the violence against the ecosystem, it cost the father his life to balance the scales.
And that brings us to the present day. Pamela writes that the family is doing well now, the kids grew up, the mother tends to the tree, the massive house is relatively peaceful. But she leaves us with one incredibly chilling detail. Even today, all these years later, when the weather turns, when there is a heavy rain and the wind blows hard through the compound, Pamela can clearly sense that someone is standing out there, right next to the new neem tree, just watching them through the window.
The truce holds. The ecosystem is functioning, but the guard is always perpetually up.
We have journeyed from a shady real estate deal built literally on the bones of murdered farmers, through the blinding arrogance of modern construction, right into the teeth of a terrifying haunting, and finally arrived at a very fragile truce forged by a desperate mother planting a single new tree.
It is a profound narrative about consequence, hubris, and the sheer terror of assuming we are the most powerful things in our environment.
Look at your own life. Are there old structures, quiet traditions, or established boundaries in your life, your family, or your workplace that you are trying to stubbornly bulldoze right now, purely for the sake of your own expansion? What delicate, unseen habitats are you happily destroying in your relentless pursuit of a bigger, better blueprint?
Because the cost of ignoring those boundaries, of assuming the blueprint supersedes the ecosystem, can be absolute ruin. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to ponder long after this deep dive ends. The mother saved her children by planting a new sapling, and the priest confirmed that the immensely powerful Brahmadaityā returned to live inside it. But consider the scale of what we are dealing with. If the old ancient tree housed an entity powerful enough to grant millions of dollars in generational wealth to a neighbor, but also exacted a brutal, blood-drenched vengeance on Pamela's father for crossing a line, what exactly is growing inside that new tree? As its roots dig deeper into that dark bone-filled soil and its branches grow stronger over the roof of that massive house, what kind of immense power is gestating in those leaves? And when the time comes, decades from now, what will that new tree eventually demand from Pamela's children?